I'm delighted to have 5 brilliant readers from issue 10 here with us tonight. So tuning in from Connemara, we have John Patrick McHugh. From Tralee, we have Emma Flynn. From Dublin, we have Chandrika Narayanan-Mohan. From London, we have Niamh Mulvey. And also tuning in from Dublin, we have Nathan O'Donnell. So we have a great geographical spread here tonight, which I suppose is the other advantage of a virtual launch. And just to give you all some background on Banshee, 5 years ago, we launched our very first issue at Cork Short Story Festival in the City Library on Grand Parade, which feels like another time altogether. But it's fantastic to be back at the festival to launch our 10th issue, which is a big milestone for us. This is it. It's a bumper edition of Banshee, actually. It's twice the size of that first issue back in 2015. So there's 180 pages of brilliant fiction, poetry and essays in here. But I suppose this being the Short Story Festival, the focus is on fiction tonight. So with that, I will introduce John Patrick McHugh, who's our first reader. John Patrick McHugh's work has appeared in the Tangerine, Winter Papers, Granta and The Stinging Fly. I love a concise bio. I don't know if you want to add anything before you start.
No, I think that's everything kind of summed up.
Perfect.
Will I work away? Perfect. Well, it's very nice to be here virtually with you all. This is from the beginning of my story, Howya Horse. When the horse with the lurcher face barged into the mansion on the hill, brazenly, jauntily, horsily, Cotter was in the sticky middle of explaining to Marianne that, contrary to her steadfast belief, it was actually no huge deal for him to have come inside her. And though he should not have done it in the first place, because A, she'd explicitly warned him not to, she hated the idea, because B, he had promised he'd 100% not come inside her, she hated the idea. The fact of the matter was that a rubber Johnny had been snugly and securely wrapped upon him, that the heated juice was consequently swaddled up inside it, and therefore, aside from her own ickier version, how bad, really and truly. They're on the landing of an L-shaped staircase, overlooking an expansive wood-trimmed living room. Both were sweaty, both hastily dressed. Cotter's explanation was not going down brilliantly, though he's unsure why he required it to go down brilliantly at all. And so when this new steedy intruder to the house party skidded into the living room, the hurling screech of horseshoe encountering varnished floor, the heavy bump and scamper of its motion, Cotter was more than happy to be able to interrupt himself mid-line and cool a potential bawling match with a dreamy mutter of "watch the horsey" as the animal's vein-knotted rump knocked the flat screen television and clattered into the bookshelf spanning the far wall. There was a gasp of wonder from below. Someone sprang for cover behind the couch. Someone let drop a beer bottle. A tall, skinny lamp tumbled over. The bulb flickered and then went completely. The horse shook its head, stamped on the 4 planks, and let out a kind of quivering vroom. Was it badly hurt? Was it dazed? Now the only light in the room was from a laptop brace on the arm of the couch, which presently went flying as the horse swung round and became entangled in the laptop's charger. Glass appeared on the rug like fresh, crusty snow. Music and light vanished as the laptop hit the fireplace. On the beige recliner, a dozy boner yanked back the footrest to make way for the pony. 3 other books in the room flattened themselves against the wall. Cotter went to hold Mara's hand and she snapped it from him. "Don't," she said flatly. The horse had a cream mane, a freckled belly, and this haggard white coat, which resembled more Tipex dragged ugly across page than downy rabbit-tail white. From the hallway, there was a clucking intake of breath and a single loud scream. Then there was more. Cotter and Marion watched as marvelled as the horse now manoeuvred through the living room into the adjacent dining area, the hooves plinking on the clay-coloured tile. A humid stank wafted, perspiring horse and the fog of shit and the outside. Opposite them, a door swung back and a face asked, "What the hell is after happening?" Cotter pointed down as if obvious. He said, "A horse." There's a meaty thud from the dining room and subsequent hurried scratching noises. In one action, Boner scrambled up from the recliner, gathering his book fastened under the crook of his arm, and then flopped over the fallen TV. Liquid, a bubbling combo of ink and cranberry gushed from his bottle. A voice inexplicably roared, "Fire! Fire!" One by one, the main lights were being switched on, and Cotter had to blink rapidly against their lurid glare. And then he noticed Tara, their host, had stumbled into the living room. The back of her white jeans and lacy crop top were caked in muck and grass hair. Her bare shoulders were sheeny, like they'd been recently smooched. Her nose was crooked, piddling red. "What is she at?" he heard Marion whisper beside him. It was about 1 p.m. It was early May, and now it was Sunday. They were halfway down the stairs when they saw the horse kick out and a hefty lad being caught on the follow-through. A sickening crack. The buck yelped, crumbled, fondled his jaw in a ball on the floor. The pop of a bottle hitting a wall, and this was repeated. 2 girls raced by them on the stairs. Tara dragged her left leg and cooed, "Dory, no!" A can of Dutch Gold was hopped against the horse's burly neck. More screams, the sound of doors slamming. The horse reared up again. Marion murmured darkly about the absolute state of this. And Cotter wasn't sure if she meant the horse or the house party, or maybe just the island in general. He turned and examined her face. Her bug eyes were ringed with mascara. Her pupils, the loveliest poo brown of stretched caramel. Her arms were crossed and her boy hair was tousled. Her cheeks were marginally flushed. And he wondered she'd not touched him to reassure that he'd protect her from his rampaging horse and to check if she'd forgotten about her fury, read the cum. And then Marion stepped forward, who stood directly in front of him on the stairs, and meeting his wistful gaze, she ordered Cotter the fuck off forever from her life. Without another word, Marion glided down the rest of the stairs and veered left. Cotter called after her, then quickly followed. There were photographs of Tara and her sister Molly and the little brother, and Molly riding many different horses, all strewn about the hallway, like a card trick gone wrong. The front door was wide open. Cotter was shoeless, sported only plain white ankle socks, and so he treaded on his tippy toes to dodge the powder and crumbs from these photo frames. "It wasn't deliberate, you know," Cotter said. "I tried to stop. Wait, Mar, listen to me." "Look, if anything," he said now at the threshold of the door, "it's a massive compliment to you." Cotter struck a cheeky pose at this remark, his tongue rapidly swabbing his upper lip, one leg a little stuck out. It was a bold move attempting a joke, but one he believed could sway her, as it was so untimely that it may suit her bleak sense of humour, so unlikely that she'd have to succumb to its cynical charm. And then it was apparent to him, standing there with his arms akimbo and a dumb simper on his face, it was the wrong move to make. It was the wrongest move. Instead of the gag being received with anger or amusement from Marion, some frisson of reaction which Cotter could bend and use for his own benefit, it was met with cold uninterest, with silence. He said her name, continuing out after her. There was a terrific wail from the kitchen, the sound of plates and cups being dropped, followed by the bigger sound of a horse in a kitchen. "I love you," he told Marion. She was heading for the back of the house. There was potted plants and a wheel barbecue, stone patio, cigarette butts like headlights. Clearing his throat, Cotter now tried to come up with something better to say, bigger, a more decisive statement that would surely split Marion's heart and allow him to fester within it. He could mention how they were sorted together 6 months, but didn't it mean so much longer? Or guilt her, remind her how he got the bus down to Westport for her clothes show thing, had stayed for close to an hour. He brushed a hank of hair behind his ears. "Don't you know I love you?" he said to her once more. There was a cackle to this. Then she announced, "You're a bad liar." Thank you.
Thanks, William JP. That was brilliant. I have to tell you, you broke a Banshee record with this story at 27 pages. It's the longest piece we've ever published, but I think it earns every one of those pages. So I suppose I just wanted to ask how you would personally define this story. You know, do you think of it as a novella or a short story? And do you find you're often drawn to kind of longer stories?
Yeah, sorry about breaking that record. I definitely could have shaved a couple of pages off it. I think of it as short story. It's not a novella anyway. But I suppose when I was writing this, honestly, I actually thought this could be about 2,000 words when I first started writing it. I think that says a lot about me and maybe my process, but that was the aim, something short and sweet. But then other characters started walking through into the scene. I was like, oh, it'd be amazing to kind of watch Tara. And then Tara did something that I didn't expect, and then that led to someone else, etc., etc. So I see it as a short story. I didn't plan for it to be this long, but I just kind of let the characters take me. And I suppose in terms of length, I have found all my kind of more recent stories are all kind of reaching that 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 border, which isn't a great, border to reach because no one really wants to look at a short story that long. But I suppose on one hand, I'd love to be able to say that it's because, you're proving as a writer that these characters are becoming more real to you. I think I'm just getting a bit more indulgent in my sensibilities and what I want to see. I just think maybe my discipline's loosening a little bit. But yeah, I think that's kind of why I'm kind of going longer.
That's interesting. You say it started when you thought it was going to be a 2,000 word story, because you don't beat around the bush. I mean, the title is Howya Horse, and the horse shows up straight away. So
yeah. Well, the whole story kind of came from, I got advice from an editor. I had an old editor who was amazing at telling me no to stories without actually saying no. And he gave me advice. He read a story where I had a horse outside the house, and it was a very soppy love story. And I remember him saying, oh yeah, I've read a lot of stories where the horse is outside the house, but I haven't read a story where a horse is inside. And being a very simple man, I was like, well, there you go. So I just put it there and we saw what happened.
That's brilliant. So our next reader tonight is Emma Flynn. Emma's fiction, non-fiction and reviews have appeared in Banshee, Vox, the Cardiff Review, The Stinging Fly, the Irish Times and others. She's been awarded and shortlisted for numerous writing awards and competitions and is currently writing her first novel. So in your own time, Emma.
Cool. Can you hear me okay, first of all? Yeah? I'm going to jump into the middle of this story, and it's basically following a woman who doesn't really leave her bedroom that often and doesn't really talk to that many people, which has now become my life. But I'm going to just jump in towards the middle. His name was Paul, and his profile picture was of him at the Eiffel Tower. I pinched my phone screen to zoom in on the picture to see his face properly, but it just became a blur of pixelated beige. He messaged me on Twitter one evening towards the end of my shift at work. Hey, his message said. Forgive the unsolicited message from a random guy, but I just wanted to say that I loved your new blog post. It's something I've thought a lot about myself, and it really resonated with me. Anyway, thanks for sharing, Paul. Meek smiley face. Punctuated by emails and calls, I'd spent the day typing just under 1,000 words titled, Did Jessica Fletcher kill all those people? For want of anything else to do, I messaged him back. Paul became a sort of cheerleader for me. Up went a blog post about Mrs. McCluskey being the best part of Desperate Housewives. In came the like, share, comment and message from Paul saying how great my writing is. 1,368 words about dogs and sitcoms, there was Paul. 600 words about how You is just a continuation of Dan's story and Gossip Girl, one new message. I became suspicious about Paul after a few weeks because he hadn't suggested we meet up for a drink or for dinner, even a coffee. I had given him a really good impression of myself, my yoga-toned body, my business-driven mind, my tendency towards crafting. It was more likely that he was the problem. She's too good for me, he probably thought. I can't ruin this. I can't let her meet me and then have it all inevitably end when she sees my pixelated beige face in the conspicuous light of real life. I felt sorry for Paul. Before I clocked off my shift one evening, I told him I was running a half marathon and asked if he wanted to sponsor me. He PayPal'd me €10 a few minutes later. It's for a great cause, I wrote back. I Googled diseases list A to Z, clicked on the first result, scrolled for a while, and then typed children with monkeypox. Oh my God, he wrote back. I wish I could send more, but I don't get paid until the end of the month. Another reason I became suspicious of Paul was that he didn't ask to see pictures of me. He had only seen one, my profile picture, a Ludwig filtered selfie from the start of the year when my hair was still short and rusty brown. It was a good picture, but why didn't he want to see more? Was he so starved for female attention that it didn't matter what I looked like? It was insulting. We went on chatting over and back about nothing and everything, films, books, politics, art, things we hated, things we really liked. I told him about my job, well, the job the better version of me had. With one hand almost of its own accord, dragged and dropped invoices into emails, I watched him reply to my stories about the office. The lack of air conditioning, but the perks of free coffee and discounted gym membership. Just ducking into a brainstorm with the marketing department, I typed. They've taken one of my ideas to run with for the next campaign. Wow, he would reply. That's amazing, congratulations. I never once specified what I did, what the company did, but I implied enough LinkedIn jargon to sound important, that my job was beyond a mere function or role. I was an ideas person. One day I tested him. Should I set up a Patreon? I tweeted. 9 minutes later, a notification lit up my screen that €20 had been sent to my PayPal account. Hey, the annotation to the transaction said. I think you deserve to get paid for what you write. My last blog post was 808 words about Derrida and Maris from Fraser. At the night, the tone of the messages changed. It felt less conversational and more confessional. He told me about his bad breakups and his insecurities, about how he felt lonely and like he would never find anybody he would click with. I liked these moments and wanted to reciprocate, wanted to share with him, but I couldn't. It felt like eavesdropping, watching him be so honest with me, a stranger. I waited until after midnight when he would splinter apart, and I steered him towards subjects I wanted to know more about. When the night was solidly black and silent, I watched the blocks of text stack up in our conversation window. I got an odd satisfaction out of seeing how easily he confided in me, and what this need to confide said about him. Was there nobody else? You seem like you've really got it together, he wrote. You have a great job, you're an amazing writer, and you're beautiful. You have it all. I'd love to have the stability you have. I feel like I'm kind of caught in the interim between two things, but I don't actually know what the next thing is yet. Guess you just have to decide what you want from life and figure out how to get it, I typed back, like an inspirational tea towel. Easier said than done, he replied. I think I need to find somebody who I would get on really well with, somebody who I stay up until 2 a.m. messaging, winking smiley face. The morning after a night like this felt like a hangover, slow and slightly shameful, trying to adjust back to reality. I spent the day pushing the furniture in my flat to the centre of the room and taking the opportunity to hoover up the unearthed dust from the hidden spaces where the bookshelves, the sofa, the record player normally were. I felt exhausted around lunchtime and lay down on the couch, pushed into the middle of the room between two bookshelves, like teetering skyscrapers from my horizontal view. The sun fell in thick white ribbons across the room, and I turned on my side to face the back of the sofa to close my eyes. When I woke up, it felt like I had slept through something huge. The sun was gone, the furniture was still in disarray, and I felt panicky from wasting a day. Previews of messages from Paul had stacked up on my lock screen. Something kept me messaging him, something that made me feel embarrassed and that I pushed away before I could think about for long enough to acknowledge that it was true. One morning I woke up and I had a message from Paul that he'd sent while I was asleep. I've had every phone I've owned since 2004 on silent, so it didn't wake me up at 4:09 a.m. I opened the messages and was confronted with a picture of Paul's penis, or at least the penis I could assume to be Paul's. I wasn't sure to respond, so I left it a while. I could see that he was online. The little dot beside his name was green. I clicked into the conversation and saw that he was typing. Then he would stop typing, send nothing. Then he would start typing again, then stop again. And this went on for hours, and watching the little ellipses bubble away was like watching wasps hover around a Coke bottle but never make it inside. I let Paul stew. He had been drunk or high and thought that sending me a picture of his penis was a good idea. Let's take this to the next stage, he thought. Now he was probably reeling from depleted serotonin, hiding in the bed in the dark, festering in his own stale hot air. I reverse searched Paul's picture and found it came up for an account for a restaurant review site. His account was surprisingly active. He posted reviews of restaurants, bars, cafes, and pop-ups almost every few days. He used words like inspired and novel in a review of an Italian cafe. He called a bar dismally outmoded. This didn't seem like the Paul I knew. The Paul I knew was a man of few words. What are you up to, Paul? Nothing much, watching stuff. Not once did he reply, oh, I'm simply trying the tasting menu at a Portuguese place near the river. Can you believe this menu isn't seasonal? I still hadn't replied to his penis, but every time I clicked into our conversation to see if he was still humming and hawing about typing, it would jump out at me like a pop-up window on a porn site. Women in your area want to fuck now. The penis was so out of place, so far from a conversation where it would be welcome or wanted, that the picture felt almost medical. There was a pleading to it. Does this look okay? Is it healthy? Like somebody unwrapping a makeshift bandage from a wound they refuse to show a doctor. Can you just assure me that this is all in order and as it should be? Every Saturday, Paul left a review for the cafe on the corner near the train station. Faultless again, guys, he had typed. I would die for these eggs. Egg emoji, heart emoji. There isn't a better place in the world than Bloody Mary happy hour at Tom's, he typed under a picture of a Bloody Mary. How in this day and age someone can't take a decent photo of a drink in good lighting from a few inches away with the technology available on even the cheapest smartphone is beyond me, yet straight men over 30 manage to find a way. On Saturday, I decided to go to Tom's for Bloody Mary happy hour. I wanted to observe, to see Paul in his natural habitat, which was apparently a discount brunch place with paper tablecloths and ramekins of ketchup skinning over on a table near the till. Perhaps Tom's had sentimental view for Paul. Maybe the Tom of Tom's was like a father figure for him, the guy who took a chance on a young man when nobody else would, and in return for years of support, Tom's, well, it was more like home. I sat in a boot by the window, the pleather sticking to the back of my legs as I slid in. It was a good vantage point. I could see the counter and the waiters behind it, the main section of the restaurant and the tables, and the kitchen door swinging open on its hinges every time an order came out and dirty plates went in. I dressed up to dress down and I looked okay. Oh, Paul? The Paul? You come here? That's so odd. I've been coming here for years, I practiced saying in my head. But I knew I wouldn't talk to him even if he did show up. About half the tables were full, couples and friends chatting and laughing as the waiters mazed through topping up identical white IKEA coffee mugs, elbows crumpling paper tablecloths. I held a laminated menu the size of a broadsheet newspaper in front of me. I couldn't see a glooming-looking beige man sitting at a table by himself, apart from an elderly man on a high stool at the counter. Excuse me, sir, do you happen to have a lonely grandson named Paul? Finding myself halfway through a plate of Eggs Benedict, I had to agree with his reviews. I transferred my PayPal balance to my bank account and ordered another Bloody Mary. Tom's was what Paul could describe as unpretentious, homey. I was working the point of my tongue around the bits of food stuck in my teeth and gums, sucking the results of the search down when I saw the family in the corner, or rather heard one of the children scream. A man with a chubby toddler bouncing on his knee traced a spoon under a dribble of chocolate sauce on the chin of another toddler. A woman signalled the waiter for 2 more Bloody Marys by holding the empty, cloudy glasses in the air. If I had 2 doting, red-cheeked babies, there would not be a social media account left without constant updates of their acclimatization to this terrible, burning planet. Babies are unequivocally the best content, though admittedly the investment is high. I hacked a knife through a crust of bread and watched the woman get up and switch sides, sliding into the booth beside the man, a stout toddler in each of their arms. "Smile, everybody," she said, holding the phone out in front of her to take in their Saturday morning vista. The smile dropped and she flicked at her screen. The toddler in her lap started doing the accelerated breathing that precedes a tantrum. "Okay, no," she held the phone out again. "I said smile, Paul, Jesus, can we just get one?" That's it.
Thanks so much, Emma. That was brilliant. I doubt I'm the only person who wants to read the Derrida Maris from Fraser essay.
Yeah, we should work on that.
I think that's right. It's a brilliant example of using the internet in fiction. And I suppose the love-hate relationship that we have with the internet. And in a way, she's having a relationship with the internet in the story. And I wondered, it's never more relevant than now. And I was wondering, have you written about the experience of the last 7 months, or do you think it's something that you will write about down the line?
Yeah, I think I hadn't until maybe a month or so ago, maybe a couple of months ago, when I realized that it wasn't just going to be this year, it was going to be like a fundamental change to our lifestyles in general. And I think how I see friendships and connections in general now is very different to how I saw it this time last year. So I think it's inevitable that it would kind of funnel into what I'm writing, because I can't remember the before times. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's an interesting change, because there's sort of a more of a focus on connection now, but there's also, obviously we're all going through such a strange and unpredictable time that it's hard to kind of present a happy face, but at the same time, being perfectly honest is not what people need all the time either. So you're in this weird kind of interim between being positive and also just having a complete breakdown all the time. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting in fiction in particular. At a certain point, I think novels are just going to mention masks as a matter of course, and there's almost going to be this very clear line between novels from the before time and novels from now, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. It'll probably, I think everyone's working on their pandemic novel anyway, so we'll probably have some horrible things to read next Christmas.
Thanks a million, Emma. Our third reader tonight is Chandrika Narayanan-Mohan. Chandrika is a Dublin-based arts manager and writer from India. Her work has been aired on NPR and Irish radio, and she regularly performs at events and festivals. Chandrika was selected for the Irish Writers' Centre Cross Borders programme in 2018 and is published in Writing Home, the New Irish Poets from Daedalus Press. Chandrika, before you read, I think you have a really nice Banshee backstory that you shared on social media recently.
Oh, okay. I was like, you're going to start with that. So I used to work at the liquor rooms in Dublin, and my job was to bring more arts events in. And one of the events was the very first Banshee launch 5 years ago. And I actually have the copy here of the very one, from, the stack, the very first stack sold there. And I found out today that I actually got all three of you to sign it. So there you go. So I just thought that was really nice to see you all 5 years on. And I didn't realize that you actually launched at the short story festivals. Sorry, I was being very Dublin centric there. But yeah, so 5 years later to being the person who fixes the XLR cables to actually being in the journal is really nice. So congratulations.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. If you want to read in your own time.
Fresh sheets. Didn't there used to be lilies? She pauses at the bottom of the stairs. Her foot scuffs at the carpet underneath the table, stained with rusty pollen. They can be too messy, I guess. I like the roses, though. They're not as lovely, but still. I wait, half smile, prickle of sweat on my neck. She follows me up the stairs. I feel the familiar sensation of her eyes on my body, the same instinct to arch my back and sweep my hips low. Carpet's new. I tell her that the gynecologist's office on the ground floor paid for it. I tell her how it stops when it gets to the floor with the flats. I make a bad joke about how we're not worth the investment. I register her silence as I mention the doctor. I don't tell her that I was there just yesterday. I let her enter the flat before me. The place looks lovely, as always. Are those new prints on the wall? I say yes, walking over to the counter to pour 2 glasses of wine. I am suddenly an awkward guest in my own home. I should be the host, seductive, welcoming her to me like I always had before. Do I sit on the too small sofa and gesture for her to join me? Do I perch on the edge of my bed and chat to her like a friend? Do I push her onto my freshly washed sheets and let her lose herself in me? She sits on the sofa as if nothing has changed and smiles. It's been a while. It's been 5 years since the day I met her. It was a Friday before the May bank holiday weekend. I don't know if I should mention it or if she already knows. 5 years since I walked into my building, drenched from a sudden downpour, weighed down with Tesco bags, swearing and blinking rain out of my eyes. I'd stopped at the sight of a woman on the floor, leaning against the wall, sobbing into her knees. I asked if she needed help. Did she live here, or did she need help getting home? She said through snot and tears that she had just received some bad news. Her husband was on his way, but he was stuck in traffic. I know we don't know each other, I'd said, but I live upstairs if you'd like a cup of tea while you're waiting. I didn't need to ask what the bad news was. I suppose there could be a number of reasons why a woman would be crying outside a gynecologist's office. That muffled howl of pain, though, the tears falling out of her mouth mixed with spit, the sick grief of it. You're looking well, you know, she says now. The new hair suits you. I smile and thank her, sipping the relief of red wine. I tell her about one of my new jobs. I am saying inane things that you say to a former colleague when you run into them in the dairy aisle. I don't tell her how she looks at me, how she looks to me, how she looks different too, with a straighter posture, new highlights and dark lipstick. She's taken to wearing heels instead of sensible flats. She's wearing too much foundation. It cracks like sifted flour around the eyes. I don't tell her about the kindly doctor from the day before who watched me as I swallowed a pill only 2 floors away from my home. I don't tell her how waiting 3 days until that moment felt like an eternity. I don't tell her how today I'm choosing to give up what was torn away from her all those years ago. She's getting up and putting down her wine glass. She's standing against me. Her jumper is soft, a baby blue cashmere. I hope I'm not being presumptuous, am I? Her hand is on the small of my back. She knows I love the feeling of pressure there, the warmth of it, like a hot water bottle when I'm on my period. As I lean in to kiss her, I taste the tang of wine and the ghost of a tic-tac on her tongue. To her, I am playing seductress. I am coy, teasing, mincing the small talk, speaking with my hands and my tongue, easing away the pain like I used to. Except I don't know what pain I am speaking to now. I only know that she's causing mine by being here, especially today. It was on her 7th visit to the flat when we first had sex. It was after 7 evenings of wine and dinner, wild, giddy laughter, and looks that lingered a bit too long to be platonic. I offered her something new and simple, a service, a comfort. I'll never forget the heady redness of it, the taste of rust on my tongue, her sobbing through grief-soaked orgasms as they tore through her. It was the first time she'd had sex since losing the baby. She wouldn't let her husband touch her, only me. Only me and my strangeness and my bottles of red wine and open mouth, and my offer to be the cup she fills that she pours herself into. I took it, absorbed the echoes of her, took the hollow onto myself, sucked it out through her pores. After a few months, she told her husband. Their relationship, peppered and lost, fell apart. They'd had a vision of their future filled with smaller versions of themselves, all sandy hair and untied shoelaces, grass stains in the laundry. It was their last shot. This wasn't her first piece of bad news. She was done trying. I make quite a good lesbian these days. She jokes easily now, naked next to me, running her hands through my hair. I ask her whether she's still attracted to men at all. She shakes her head and smiles. She asks me the same question. I nod and shrug. She tells me about a lesbian cruise she went on. She regales me with stories making me laugh about the sunshine and the drama and, of course, the women. The dapper butches, the greying femmes, all sizes and colours with 2 things in common, being gay and having money. It's so far away from this grey Dublin evening. It is so far from the day she sobbed in my hallway. I'm afraid I can't stay, darling, not this time. She's tying a trench coat around herself. She really does look well, lighter, freer, beautiful. She leans down to kiss me and takes a fold of 50-euro notes out of her pocket and presses it against the pillow. Still the same amount? I nod, sitting up with the duvet around me. She leans in to kiss me again before turning towards the door. I say something vague and friendly. She smiles and looks back before waving and shutting the door behind her. See you soon. I look down at the bed. There's a wet patch in the middle and 2 strands of her hair on the pillow. I can hear the front door opening and shutting, and I imagine her clip-clopping down the street in her new heels and fashionable coat, straight back and smug with an "I just got laid" look on her face. I stand up to start stripping the bed and pause. I reach for my handbag and take out a small box. Popping the blister wrap, I put 2 pills in the palm of my hand. I tell myself that I'm ready, that it won't hurt that much, and that the rotunda is only a few streets away if I need it. I tell myself that I'm going to be fine. I put the pills under my tongue and I wait for the pain.
Thanks so much, Chandrika. That was amazing. I want to talk more just about the development of this story, because it's technically a flash fiction. It's 3 pages long, but it seems to contain like a novelistic depth and complexity. And you can kind of sense the characters' lives spilling off the edge of the page. So I'm just wondering, what inspired you to write about these characters?
I mean, so that apartment is this apartment. I've sort of started writing prose quite recently, and I tend to just frame it around this kind of space. And there's literally a gynecologist on the ground floor, so I just structured it the same way. And it just happened because I was literally standing at my door, and I heard someone crying like this mad wail, like a howl, and it was really weird. And I could hear someone was with her, so I didn't go down to check. And I kind of just sat down an hour later and wrote this, like just started thinking, Jesus, that was a weird, strange experience. And then started thinking, you know, yeah, what would make someone cry like that in a hallway in some doctor's office? And yeah, this kind of came from it. So that's how it happened anyways.
That's incredible. I had no idea you actually had the gynecologist's office downstairs.
Yeah. This is the small sofa.
But there's a sense as well, I think, that in this story, that the 2 characters are almost like 2 sides of the same coin, and they both kind of go through these very similar experiences together. And you know, the girl who's crying at the start is like empowered by the end, and vice versa. I don't know, were you thinking of them as almost these twins in a strange way?
I think I was just thinking of like, what a weird thing where they kind of find an equilibrium between each other, but the power dynamic definitely gets different. It starts with one person being sort of on a higher up on the hierarchy, and it ends when like wealth and confidence comes into play. It completely skews it. And yeah, and it was also weird because this is a post-repeal story. I had to, you know, weave in. I was like, how do the pills work? Not that, and you can't find the information. So it was just kind of thinking they come together as if they're on the same level, but by the end of it, you can see the disparities on so many different levels, and it only seems to bother one of them.
Thanks so much, Chandrika. It was great. So next up, we have Niamh Mulvey. Niamh is a writer and editor. She's previously published work in The Singing Fly, Irish Times, The Pool, and various other places. She's co-founder and director of a new personalised children's book publisher, In the History Books. And Niamh was also just shortlisted in the 2020 Sean O'Faolain Award for her story, Mother's Day. So congratulations, Niamh.
Thank you. Thanks, Eimear. I'm going to read an abridged version of this. I think in total it's about 11 minutes, but abridged, hopefully I'll get it under 10. So I'll go. My first Marina. When I was young, a man more than twice my age fell in love with me. I was already in love with a man or boy of my own age, and he was in love with drinking, chess, and certain factions of left-wing politics. The younger one was not in love with me, but also he didn't seem that bothered about the lengthy, agonized emails the older man was sending me, lauding my beauty and brilliance. The younger man was treating me far less well than I deserved, but on the other hand, the older man's fervent admirations were far more than I merited and made me very nervous. It was, admittedly, pretty interesting to hear or read. He mostly wrote to me all about how amazing I was, and if I could have taken it all seriously, then I'm sure I would have been utterly smitten. Falling in love with this older man would have involved in falling in love with a superior version of myself, which unfortunately I was unable to do, my real self having far too intimate a knowledge of the many ways I failed to resemble the gorgeous and impossible creature of his, the older man's, desire. He was also married, this older man, which made the whole thing with him ridiculous. How could I be possibly having a relationship with a married man? I wasn't in a soap or in a book. My life thus far had felt nothing like any soap, film, or book, and so when something that would have been quite mundane in a work of fiction happened to me, I had real trouble believing in it. Like death, for example. When my friend had died the previous summer, separating the performance of my grief from its reality proved completely impossible, and so I just stopped going back to my hometown entirely and threw myself into life in college, which meant I suddenly had excellent grades and this complicated love situation. It was late spring and exams were coming. It was my final year and I had no idea what I was going to do next in my life. I spent most days in a formless, hungover state, working in the library until around 6, then going home to my cramped flat before either going out again or with friends or going to the older man's house where he would feed me delicious meals and talk to me about beautiful things like the book he was writing or his decadent long ago youth. I responded with some stories of my own. The older man wanted to understand me and enjoyed hearing tales of my adolescent love complications. Many things had happened to me as a teenager, but I still did not understand their significance, and talking to the older man helped me figure them out a little. But he seemed to be interested in things I considered less relevant, so I often left these conversations feeling both flattered by his keen attention and confused by the specific things he paid attention to. One evening after dinner, the older man tried to kiss me and I declined, and I went over to the boys' house. It was damp and smelly, but I felt full of a sexual thrill when I walked in the door. The boy was in the kitchen putting a frozen pizza in the oven and talking to his housemates. We went up to his room and had sex. The next day, I had dinner with the older man again, and I told him about the boy. He was very hurt, he said. He thought there was something special between us, he said. There is, I said, but I don't feel about you in that way. What way? You know what way. Is it because of my age? I told him it wasn't. He looked crushed. The older man then said that he couldn't be around me for a while, not to call, he'd be in touch. I never called him anyway. I felt kind of guilty about the whole situation, but it was impossible for me to see myself as the scarlet woman in this context. His wife and kids live in a different town. He stayed in our college town during the week, spent the weekends with them. I didn't really believe they existed. Not that I thought he was lying. I just couldn't believe reality was this scripted. One night, a few days after the older man told me he was swearing off me for a while, I got a text from Jim. Jim was a boy of my own age from my hometown. He was going to be in my college town in a few days and asked if I wanted to go drinking with him. I absolutely did. I had been with Jim once, but there was nothing really between us. The boy who had caused all the bother in our hometown was his best friend, however, and this was part of the attraction in spending time with Jim. I met him off the bus. It was a bright early summer day. I felt like I had lived for 100 years already. Jim and I started drinking in an old pub near the water. Hours later, we sat on the edge of the quay. It was a rare still night. The town was busy with summer drinkers. Jim was acting like he thought something was going to happen between us. All I wanted was him to ask me what had happened. Why had she done it? Jim was leaning in to kiss me when the boy I was sleeping with loomed up out of nowhere. Hey, he said. I went home with the boy, of course. Jim came with us. We all stayed up late listening to music and smoking. Me and the boy went to bed together as a pale dawn was breaking. I felt unbearably happy. The next day, the older man called. I was sitting at the kitchen table in the boy's house, drinking coffee and thinking I should go into the library. Jim was packing his things in the living room. He was talking about how he got home, he was going to go out shooting with his brother. Shooting what? I'd asked him. Whatever is there, he said. The older man wanted to see me after his classes. I was looking forward to it because I wanted to tell him all about how Jim had never once mentioned Marina the whole day long, still less his best friend, the boy I'd betrayed her with, the boy she'd killed herself over, the boy who made it impossible for me to go home. The older man was in a very bad mood when I got to his place. I was unspeakably cruel, he said. I shrugged and looked out the window. He calmed down and poured me some wine. Wait, he said. So there's two guys, the guy who goes here and this guy from home, this Jim. That's right, I said. And Jim and Marina. No, Jim's friend and Marina. Another guy. Yes, you slut, the older man said. I nodded. You were going to destroy me, he said. I looked around the living room. It was very comfortable and full of books. The food he was feeding me with was delicious. I'd never eaten so well in my life. The wine he'd given me made my cheeks burn. I was very tired and wondered if I could go upstairs and sleep, but I knew that would be cruel when I had no intention of sleeping with this man. I wondered in that moment who I was and what on earth was wrong with me. She goes up to the bathroom. So in the bathroom, I stood on the closed toilet lid and stuck my head out the window. It was a Velux window built into the roof. I could smell the sea in the distance. I pulled myself out into the roof and sat there looking up at the stars. I imagined Marina sitting beside me. She wouldn't have liked this situation. She would have thought this older man weird and mean. We had been friends since we were 9.5. When we turned 16 and I suddenly went crazy for boys, she got very intimidated. I hated that. It didn't matter to me that she had never kissed anyone. I just wanted us to be friends as we had always been. I heard the older man moving in the bathroom beneath me. He must have been wondering where I'd got to. Suddenly his head poked out the window. "Get down from there," he said. He sounded like he was talking to a child. Marina's dad had ignored me at the funeral. He knew a bit about what had happened. I don't think he was angry with me. It was more like I was a ghost and he looked through me. The edge of the roof didn't seem so far from the ground. I edged down the slope. It was a dry night and the bumpy texture of the surface felt solid. I wasn't afraid. "You're going to break my soffit," the older man yelled out of the window at me. I swung my legs over the edge and looked down. It was a lot higher than I thought. I realized I was shaking and I thought, oh, I wonder if this is something like what Marina had felt before she had done what she had done. It wasn't like her to kill herself. She would have hated the attention of a funeral. Girls who didn't even know her wept like their houses were on fire. She would have hated that. She hated hypocrisy and bullshit. She was the very best person in my life. The older man was crawling out of the window now and edging his way gingerly down the roof, sort of crouched down on his bottom. He was wiry and youthful seeming, but the concentration in his face made the veins in his neck stand out, and suddenly he looked old and absurd. He put his hand over my hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "Are you trying to escape me?" I considered this. I wasn't, not really. Marina would never get herself into this kind of situation, and that used to make me so frustrated. She didn't want to do things to see what would happen. She had too much integrity. She wanted to be rooted in something. She hated sex. She told me that she wished it didn't exist, that it ruined everything. Jim's friend had liked her sense of humor. He made her laugh. I was jealous. I was the only one who could make Marina laugh like that. Their thing, whatever it was, had nothing to do with sex. It had been pure in a way that made me feel filthy. And so I had done what I had done with him. "This is romantic," the older man said gently. "I've never climbed up here before. You make me see things I've never seen before." I knew then that I had to jump off the roof. I heard Marina telling me to do it, not because I was in danger, as if, but because jumping off the roof would have meant I would probably break my ankle, forcing me to stay at home for a few weeks and get away from all these men and boys. I would probably also break the older guy's soffit, another plus. I started laughing to myself at these things Marina was saying to me. "Why are you mocking me?" the older guy said. "Stop sniggering." I laughed longer and louder, and then I jumped. Marina was right. I did break my ankle, but she failed to mention that breaking an ankle was not like twisting one. I was in agony and had to have an operation. As autumn came, I realized I was slowly starting to lose my mind. She spent the summer alone in her bed in her apartment. I called the younger guy, the one I'd been kind of in love with at the beginning of the summer. He'd been away for most of the summer, traveling around Europe, going to music festivals, etc. We slept together and I felt better. I wondered if it was really dreadful of me to be doing this again. Surely I had to learn how to be alone. Surely that was what Marina was trying to tell me. Surely that would be the meaning of this story. But the younger guy kept coming back to see me. He didn't make me feel bad. I didn't want the end of the story to be me falling in love and having a real relationship, but that is what happened. I did not deserve that. And so during the night, almost every night for many years, I woke up tormented with guilt and darkness. I saw Marina everywhere. I called my baby daughter after her, wondering if that would make her go away, if I even wanted her to go away. It did not. I did not. Now my daughter is getting to be the age at which Marina and I first became friends, and she has a best friend of her own. I watch them both carefully. I am friends with my daughter's friend's mother. One day I'll tell her about my first Marina and we'll come up with a plan.
That was fantastic. Thanks so much, Niamh.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Eimear.
Not at all. One of the things I love about the story is the kind of the cyclical sense you get of these like really intense female friendships. And I wonder if there's a first Marina, is there also a second and third and fourth Marina? And there's also the sense at the end that the whole thing, history is going to repeat itself essentially with the daughter. And I mean, are intense female friendships and those kind of cycles like something that you enjoy writing about in your other work?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was practicing reading this story earlier, and I almost always cry a bit at the end, or like I don't quite cry, but I feel really emotional at the very end. And I don't really understand quite why, because it's not in any way autobiographical. Like there's no Marina, like I made her up. And I'm nothing like the character in the story. I was not half as cool as that girl, unfortunately. But I think there's something about the things that happens to you when you're a child and a teenager that take you a really long time to recover from or figure out, even if they're not really unusual. They just make a big impression on you. And then, when you get a bit older, you one of the kind of, I guess, gifts of getting older is that you can see some of those events in a different light, and you have these moments in your life when you think, oh, that was about this, and this person is not what I thought. But I think it never really ends, that reinterpretation of things, and you never feel like you have it all figured out. And then I think, like you just said, these things just repeat themselves in ways that you have no control over. So I think the reason that I find the ending kind of painful is that I can just see this woman watching her child and wanting so much to just prevent whatever went wrong with her friendship. Something like that happened to her. There's absolutely nothing she can do. It's like the tragedy of being a parent or of being a human, and yeah, so that's what it's about, basically.
Yeah, I love that ending in that sense that, she just has to let things course, and she's just not able to let go in that way. It's really great.
Thank you.
I also I wanted to shout out your fantastic newsletter, In the Red.
Oh, thank you so much.
READ, which is all about publishing and money, or lack of same. I wonder, how has that been going? Have you been getting a good response?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning it, Eimear. Yeah, it's something I sort of, usually I do things, I spend like years thinking about something and then like do it. But this, I got the idea and sort of just did it straight away. And I'm really, it kind of grew out of an article I wrote back in the summer about my experiences working in the publishing industry, and which, kind of went quite viral within the industry. And I just was sort of like inundated with messages from people who'd had similar experiences to mine. And, I'm not like, I don't see myself as a campaigner or anything. I don't work really in publishing anymore. So I don't really have a role, as it were, but I think that's sort of okay as well. It's okay just to sort of talk to people quite honestly about stuff like this. And I think, there is a lot of talk in our industry, in the publishing industry, about how to do things differently. And, it's been a long time coming, but I did feel a bit frustrated at the lack of discussion around money and around money. That's it, just money. Like no one really talks about it. And the reason that people don't talk about it is because you can't really do it when you have a job, because you're too scared. But I don't have a job, so I can say what I want. So I think, but I still really love the industry, and I really am very connected to it. So I think I'm in quite a good position to sort of, because I am connected and I know a lot of people who work in it. But I also have that sort of distance, so I have the luxury of being able to speak out when it will be more difficult for other people to do so.
Brilliant, thanks so much.
Yeah. If anyone wants to chat about it, just it's In the Red, and just drop me an email or anything.
Brilliant,
thank you.
Our final reader tonight is Nathan O'Donnell. Nathan is a writer, researcher, and one of the co-editors of Paper Visual Art. He's a research fellow at IMA and lectures on contemporary art. He's been appointed writer-in-residence at Maynooth University for the year 2020 to 2021, and is currently working on a non-fiction book. So in your own time, Nathan.
Great. Thanks very much, Eimear. And thanks everybody who's listening in. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the audience. I'm going to read about half of the story that's in the latest issue of Banshee. I wanted to start with a caveat though, in case anybody feels like calling the ISPCA at the end. I do actually have a dog, but the relationship between the narrator and their dog in the story is not mine. You can see him, like, actually he's behind me on the couch. He's safe and well. So yeah, I just wanted to begin with that sort of clarification. So the story's in about 13 parts. I think I'll make it to 6 or 7. I'll just see how I go. Okay, and the story's called Bad Dog. 1. Sprinkle's teeth are bad. They've been bad for weeks, but she doesn't seem to be in pain. She opens her mouth and lets her tongue hang out, and it's a mess of gunge and all the little bristles, broken nubs. 2. I call the vet. The guy tells me to bring her in. I ask how much, and he kind of hums for a second, like he's thinking about it, but in a worried way. And it's unclear if he's considering my financial situation or the dog's health. It's probably the dog's health. And then he says, well, it depends. He says it in such a way that it's clear it depends on my decency. He doesn't care how much money I have or whether it's a stretch. He is judging me based on what I'm willing to do or not do for my dog. He hasn't given me a figure, a ballpark even. This could be thousands of euro for all I know. I've never been to the fucking vet. He won't talk to me about money. He thinks it's distasteful of me to even ask. 3. In the morning, she makes fitful complaining sounds, low like the bursts of a vacuum cleaner starting. This is only the beginning. In full flow, her noise is an incessant full throat glugging. Once I take her out, she's like a metal coil released. She springs and bends and bounds. She's sniffing at the weeds, pissing on the cobbles. I stand over her while she squats and she looks at me anxiously right in the eye, like she's ashamed to be caught in the act. We walk through the expanse where the flats used to be. Most of the blocks are demolished now. When I moved here first, they were just like flats you'd find anywhere. By the end, they'd become notorious. They were so neglected. Gangs and stabbings and the kids like wild animals, heedless of people. Like it was our fault, everyone's fault, they'd been deserted. You had to steer clear. They've since bulldozed most of it. There are just 1 or 2 blocks left standing now in the middle of the burnt-out stretch of grass. Most of the units boarded up apart from a few unhappy hangers-on. A window here and there still occupied. Clotheslines hanging out of the dereliction. There must be families inside, refusing to budge. I don't feel any sympathy. I know what they are like. If Sprinkle takes a shit around here, I don't even bother picking it up. 4. It looks as if the gum has grown around some of the teeth, little ominous nests in her mouth, blackened snaggles in the middle, a fleshy soup. It's like she's decomposing. 5. Some nights I stop off at the pub at the end of the road. My favourite seat is by the bar, with the old men who talk about the races, who put money on what and how much, or else they watch the news on the TV screen above the bar. The news these days is bright, telling us we're safe and sound, we're looked after, even though we know, we feel we're not, and cast their jaundiced commentary on everything. Sometimes I see an old friend in the lounge and I'll sit with them. Sometimes I sit alone in the corner when the place is quiet. The barmen politely pretend I am not there. I know Sprinkle is howling while I sip my beer. I know she howls when I go out and keeps howling and does not stop until I get home. But what am I supposed to do about it? What do people expect me to do? When I walk back from the pub, the streets are febrile. People are trying to get home. They're in a panic, driving like they cannot get far enough away from the city. Like the city is an infection, growing, spreading, a monster from which every day, after working or shopping or whatever it is they've been doing, they must flee. They speed through the inner rings of the city, desperate for the suburbs, safety. They thunder by the corner as I am marching home defiant. I slam my front door shut behind me and catch a glimpse of my face in the mirror over the mantelpiece, and I feel relieved just to see my own reflection, human, with human expressions, a face that is not melting. 5? Sorry, I've lost track. 6. Other nights, I stay home and watch TV shows, long sequences of them. They do not have to be good. I watch good and bad indifferently. I watch TV like I'm watching a long cylinder of compressed meat churning from a sausage maker, all the ingredients squeezed into a single monotone consistency, the same at every point. I watch people get shot, stabbed, raped, with the same indifferent eye, and once their torture is over, I forget them. I forget one episode by the middle of the next. I confuse plot lines. Sometimes I don't recognize a character, though I've been watching them for hours. I open can after can of Carlsberg, and I sink them into me absent-mindedly. I feel the weight of the accumulating liquid press against the bulge of my belly, and still I continue to pour it down. Sprinkle looks on curiously from her bed. She watches me get up for a fresh can, roughly one every half hour, and then she watches me sit back down. When I stand up to go to bed, though, she's up like a light. I don't do anything different. She just knows. There is something in my gait this time that tells her this is it. I suppose it's her only occupation, studying me, tuning herself to every quirk and gesture, every slight shift of my weight, every intimate jerk of my body. I watch her, watching me, preparing to make my way to bed. I think, this is what reliance looks like. I can see that her teeth are getting worse. They're ghastly, filed down shards of bone, the gums rotting around them, little pools of black like the teeth of a drunk. The sight of them makes me shudder. I think of my own teeth. I imagine them eroded, winnowed down to brown, angry stubs. I take a drink from my can, the sugars washing around my molars, my canines. But my teeth are fine. They're robust, pearly white. It strikes me that perhaps it's Sprinkle's teeth I am destroying. Like the more I drink, the worse they get. They say people rub off on their dogs. Is that what's happening? Once the thought enters my head, I cannot get it out. I take a last swig from my can. 7. The night is slow in coming. It is silent, but the air is full of agitation. Every creak or stir in the house I mistake for the first volley of a fit of crying, first maw or yelp. It's the middle of the night, but I imagine her howling. I lie in bed, feeling the fury swarm in my blood for transgressions that haven't yet happened and might never, while Sprinkle sleeps, contented, at the end of the bed, at one with me, as happy as she'd be with someone better. I guess I have time to do read another section or two. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got through it quicker than I thought. So I'll read 8. I'll read to 10. So 8. In the morning, she's at it again, whinging. My head heaves the way a ship heaves, or at least the way I imagine a ship heaves, adrift on an oceanic storm. My lips are chapped and sticky from gin, wine, last night, too much of both, so much I feel them threatening to come back unannounced, the salty brimming of them in my mouth as I realize I may throw up. Sprinkle is still whinging. I can hear her on my way downstairs to put Solpadeine in a glass and wait till it stops fizzing. I pause and lay my ear against the inner stairwell wall. I will her to keep going, taking in every tremor. I purse my lips and scream as hard as I can with my mouth closed. I make a ballooning, desperate sound. For a few moments we maw at each other, mimicking frightful, strangulated howls. 9. I never wanted her. She was not my idea. She was just an excuse, a substitute, a reason to keep a relationship with another person, a human person, going. She didn't work. People say you can judge someone by how they feel about their dog, or they say some shit about civilization. Dogs are a hallmark of civilization, that kind of crap. I don't know, maybe they are. But what about the people who've just wound up here without planning it or thinking about it? What about us? 10. The morning radio is up full blast in the corner shop next door. They have solutions. They're putting measures in place. I don't know what crisis they're talking about. They say new measures are being implemented. The government has redoubled their efforts. I buy a litre of milk and a dozen eggs and 20 Benson hedges and a scratch card. I can't resist scratch cards. When I get home, I'll sit with Sprinkle and scratch it off, saying to her, look at this. This could be our lucky number. So I don't know what I'd even do differently if I won €25,000 or €50,000 or whatever it is you can win. I just like the element of chance. I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much, Nathan. What's your dog's name, actually?
Jake.
Jake.
Yes. a decidedly different dog. Some of this, I did have a neighbour who, some of this was written in spite, as it probably comes across. But yeah, I had a neighbour with a dog who wouldn't stop howling. So over the course of a winter, I just wrote thousands and thousands of words wishing ill upon both my neighbour and the dog. And yeah, some of that has made its way into.
That's really interesting, actually, because I was going to ask you about balance in writing, because I think this story walks a really fine line between being really visceral and disturbing on one level. I'm thinking of like the black nests in Sprinkle's mouth, and then it's kind of strangely tender on the other hand. And obviously I'm a huge dog person, so I kind of felt the story very, very deeply. But I was just wondering, did it take a lot of drafts to perfect that balance and to kind of winnow down those thousands of words you wrote?
The genesis of it has been really tortuous. It started with this sort of spite writing, but it evolved then into something. At one point, it was a sort of a set of two monologues, sort of speaking to one another. And yeah, eventually, I mean, I realized that I think writing that's motivated entirely by spite is probably not. It's, as you say, it's probably. I think, yeah, there does need to be a sort of a balance, and I guess I try to inhabit this person. This again, some of it is like Chandrika was saying. Some of this is modelled on my own life. Some of it is modelled on my relationship with the dog. Some of it is actually, I think what I was trying to do here was write about isolation and care and the kind of pressure that gets put upon these relationships of care, whether that's to other people or to animals, when we're in a position where we're all being atomized. And yeah, I guess in order to try to write about that, I really had to inhabit this quite unpleasant, unpalatable character, and to really entertain a kind of ambivalence about that sense of obligation and duty. So it was uncomfortable, but I think, yeah, I guess I was hoping to strike some sort of balance like what you're describing.
Yeah, I love how over the course of the story, kind of almost despite himself, he finds himself just like taking more and more responsibility for the dog, I suppose. And yeah, the ending's really beautiful. If anybody, I know you didn't get to read it, but I do recommend reading the end of Nathan's story if you have a copy of the magazine at home. I think that's all we have time for this evening. Many thanks to our 5 wonderful readers, to Emma, JP, Nathan, Chandrika and Niamh.